One, and we're rolling.
Historically, the Bahamas was understood to sit outside the hurricane belt. Of course, that was before we began to feel the effects of climate change. Recent devastating hurricanes have included Joaquin, which hit Long Island in 2015, Matthew, which hit the capital, Nassau, in 2016, and most tragically in September 2019, Hurricane Dorian, which destroyed entire communities on the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama. I'm Nicolette Bethel, founder and festival director of Shakespeare in Paradise, a theater festival held in Nassau.
And I'm Philip Smith, formerly of the University of the Bahamas, now with Savannah College of Art and Design.
Shakespeare in Paradise was founded in 2009. It is the first and to date, the only international Shakespeare festival in the English-speaking Caribbean. Shakespeare in Paradise marries Shakespeare and the environment in some most unexpected ways. On Friday, October 5th, 2009, Shakespeare in Paradise presented its inaugural performance, The Tempest. This, we knew, was a risky venture. While some schools featured the predictable Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, etc. on their syllabi, The Tempest was relatively unknown to students and teachers alike. But there was method in the madness. Two main principles lay beneath its selection. First, The Tempest had been used throughout the 20th century to present the central tropes of anti-colonial thinking. Prospero, the magician, the invader of the island, the savior, the civilizer, the teacher of language, the ruler, is an apt personification of the British in the colonies. And Caliban's very name suggests the Caribbean region. His strength is prodigious, his sexuality unruly and dangerous. Caliban has been associated with the people of the Caribbean by writers and directors from the 1940s to the present. Shakespeare is, for the Bahamian people, a sort of Prospero, a writer whose language we may be able to speak, but never to understand, whose art we might learn to appreciate only insofar as it reminds us how far we are from creating it. There are no Ariels among us. We use his language to curse. But that was not how we sold the idea of The Tempest to my fellow producers and directors. We sold the idea that The Tempest was the right play for the right place at the right time because it was about a hurricane. Shakespeare lived in a time of great political, social, and religious uncertainty. Shakespeare's England was threatened by multi-year famines during the 1590s, intermittent outbreaks of plague, and the possibility of civil war following the death of the childless Queen Elizabeth. It is inevitable then that Shakespeare's stage served as a means to play out these anxieties. Later, my collaborator, Phil Smith, will argue that our 2016 version of Macbeth found inadvertent expression for the trauma of a hurricane and its aftermath. I'm going to tell you that our whole existence is the expression, explicit and subliminal, of living against and amidst hurricanes. Phil's reading of The Blasted Heath lay bare some of the things that might have been functioning in our subconsciousness. When Philip Burrows met with his set designer, the artist John Cox, and told him he wanted bare trees, skeletal images to constitute Burnham Wood, he was not consciously thinking about the impact of Joaquin. We did not consciously make the link with the sea blackened trees. But Philip Burrows' family is from Long Island. So is John Cox's wife's family. The devastation of Long Island after Joaquin was there, inevitably, in our unconsciousness. Hurricanes were present in our conscious minds when we mounted The Tempest in 2009. Residents of Nassau who had lived through Floyd and Michelle were treated to an audio description of what was happening in Grand Bahama in the fall of 2004, when radio producers stayed on the air even as their studio flooded. And so The Tempest was chosen to inaugurate our festival. It served two purposes. It opened our Bahamian dialogue with our colonizers, with our post-colonial present, and it allowed us to process our changing environment. This is the set of our version of The Tempest. I'd like to direct your attention to the darkening sky, the shape and angle of the clouds, and the lone tree, stripped bare of leaves and seeming to bend against the wind. We might contrast the image of an island presented here with William Moore Egley's 1850 painting, Prospero and Miranda. The painting, as you can see, offers an image of a sky and water in beautiful various shades of blue. The skies and waters that surround the islands of the Bahamas often are many shades of blue, but as anyone who lives here knows, they can also be dark.
The staging of The Tempest was not the first time that Shakespeare in Paradise engaged the theme of natural disaster. A year after Joachim came the performance of Macbeth. The last performance of the 2016 run occurred on Sunday, October 1st. Anyone who picked up a newspaper over the following days would have been greeted with news of another incoming storm. As the last performance of Macbeth took place, Bahamians were placing boards over their windows and buying tinned goods. 2 days later, Matthew, a Category 4 storm, tore through several Bahamian islands, including New Providence. Matthew uprooted trees, damaged infrastructure, blocked roads, and destroyed homes, leaving most of the island without power for weeks. These are photographs from the day after the hurricane, including photos taken outside the theatre. The storm cast a shadow not only over the events which had followed, but over the events which preceded it. While the staging of Macbeth did not seek to overtly anticipate or describe either the past destruction of Joachim or the coming disaster of Matthew, the two storms shaped the meaning of the 2016 staging of Macbeth. In its textual alterations and its set, the play rhymed with and obliquely described the trauma of natural disaster. The performance of Macbeth, drawing indirectly from earlier performances of The Tempest, found in Shakespeare an appropriate means to describe and anticipate disaster. In addition to embodying many of the anxieties of Shakespeare's age, Macbeth has a perhaps unearned reputation for anticipating or even causing disaster. In 1898, Max Beerbohm claimed that biographer John Aubrey and the diarist Samuel Pepys both recorded examples of actors playing in Macbeth becoming mysteriously sick. Both anecdotes were fictional, and yet Beerbohm's assertion that Macbeth brings disaster has gained considerable purchase within theatre communities. Even in the Bahamas, the 3 years in which Macbeth has been performed were years which brought hurricanes to the capital. Michelle in 2001, Francis and Jean in 2004, and Matthew in 2016. Macbeth then, in both its inception and its stage mythology, has disaster in its DNA. The Shakespeare in Paradise performance of Macbeth drew upon the recurring apocalyptic themes found in Shakespeare and the mythology which surrounds the play. It foreshadowed the coming hurricane and was haunted by Joachim. One area in which the apocalyptic tone of the play seemed to describe the post-hurricane experience was in its staging of trauma. A trauma victim often feels that their experience refuses to remain in the past, that, like Banquo's ghost, it erupts unexpected and uninvited into their consciousness. These signs of trauma shot through the performance, in which the past, like the moment of trauma, threatens constantly to infringe upon the present. The change in location from Inverness to Long Island offered an appropriately blasted heath for the play's setting. The upstage and downstage were divided by a screen, behind which were placed leafless, seemingly dead trees. These stripped and uprooted trees, separated from the action of the play, provided seats for the Weird Sisters and Banquo's ghost. Often, as in the scene in which Macbeth saw Banquo sitting at his table, this ethereal space seemed to exist only in Macbeth's mind. These dead trees belonged, in other words, to a place which pushes against consciousness, occupied by things dead and otherworldly. Perhaps appropriately, as a resident of Long Island, Macbeth found that the violence of the storm, like the violence of his own deeds, is not consigned to the past or future, but erupts into the present. In a characteristic both of the trauma narrative and the forward-backwardness of Shakespearean apocalypse, the moment of trauma refused for Macbeth to remain consigned to the moment of its occurrence. The play also returns Macbeth and brings him forward to the moment before the storm. When the witches tell Macbeth that he shall never be vanquished, he shall never vanquished be until great Burnham Wood to high Dunstanay Hill shall come against him, he replies, that will never be. In this staging, Macbeth, exhausted by anxiety, sank to the floor with laughter. The idea that a wood might uproot itself seemed impossible. Like Macbeth, many residents of the Bahamas did not anticipate what was to come, and for many, their lack of foresight became embroiled in the trauma of the event itself. The trees of Long Island, both in the diegesis of the play and the 2015 storm, did move, just as the trees of Nassau would in the days to follow the performance.
In the Caribbean, Shakespeare has, at different times and in different contexts, been an instrument of colonization, a channel for resistance, and a partner in a creative dialogue. In the same way, too, Shakespeare may be one way in which to engage with the uncertainty that climate change brings today. In this paper, we have sought to show that the Shakespeare in Paradise performances of The Tempest and Macbeth found inadvertent expression for the trauma of a hurricane and its aftermath. The performances encircled and rhymed with the experience of living through and living after a natural disaster. Shakespeare in Paradise continues to engage unavoidably with the environment. Our festival takes place in the last week of September and the first week of October of every year, except for 2020, when COVID-19 made us virtual. These months are the peak of the Bahamian hurricane season. Though hurricanes do pass through in July and August, they seem to strike with greater frequency in September. And historically, the worst ones hit in September and October. Francis, Jean, Joaquin, Matthew, Irma, Dorian. Small wonder we see hurricane trauma on our stage. It is there for us all the time.